Ok, passati i 10 minuti, diciamo, di ehm,
Okay, so we waited 10
attesa,
minutes for everybody, so let's start.
iniziamo.
Good morning,
Buongiorno a
everyone,
tutti,
and welcome to
benvenuti
this
a questo
fifth
quinto
meeting of the
incontro
cycle
di
dedicated to
webinar
the
dedicato
unaccompanied
ai giovani
minors,
imprenditori
migrants coming
che
to
arrivano
Europe. It's a
in
cycle that
Europa,
was promoted within
ciclo promosso nell'ambito del
the
progetto
FA.B
FA.B,
project
che è
financed by the
Facilitating
European
Migration, finanziato
Commission
dalla
that
Commissione
sees
europea, dove
Cidis
Cidis
as the
fa
leader
sigla di un
among many
partenariato di paesi,
institutions
di associazioni
and
di paesi
bodies that work
che si
in
affacciano
the
sul
Mediterranean
Mediterraneo e
Sea
che
together with
lavorano
Cidis
insieme a
and
Cidis,
other
che è
ones
l'ultimo sempre partner del
to
progetto,
implement
per
a welcoming
l'implementazione di un
system
sistema
that
di
is
accoglienza
adequate and proper for
adeguato
unaccompanied minors coming
ai
to
detentori che
Italy,
arrivano nei nostri
specifically
paesi,
Greece,
i nostri
Malta,
paesi
Cyprus, and
Grecia, Malta,
Spain,
Cipro e
with a
Spagna,
specific reference to
con
alternative
particolare
measures
riferimento
of
alle diverse
welcoming,
forme di
including the
accoglienza,
family
quindi
welcoming and
all'accoglienza in famiglia e
the
all'affidamento
possibility of
familiare
adoption of
dei minori,
unaccompanied
come
minors
che
that
arrivano
is
in alternativa
an alternative to the most used
alla più
way
utilizzata, diciamo,
of the
forma
so-called
degli istituti
of foster houses.
delle accoglienze
That
in
is what
capitaneria, in comunità alloggio,
always happens in
a
Italy, or at
differenza di quello
least
che avviene
that is what happens
prevalentemente
the
in
most.
Italia.
Today,
Oggi
we would like to welcome
diamo il
our speaker
benvenuto alla
and guest,
nostra
Emira Kola, Mrs.
ospite,
Emira Kola.
che
She's
è
a
Emira
cultural
Kola,
mediator
mediatrice culturale e
and
operatrice
and she works for Alexander
della
Lange
Fondazione
Association.
Alexander Lange,
She also
operatrice
works for
legali, associazione
Voluntarius, another
Voluntarius,
association that
che si
gives
occupa di
support
assistenza e supporto
to people
gestionali ai
seeking
richiedenti
asylum and
protezione
international
internazionale.
protection. She
Lavora
works mainly in the province
prevalentemente
of Bolzano, in the
nella
north of
provincia di
Italy,
Bolzano, e
and
ci condurrà
she
nel
will lead
nostro,
us
diciamo, solito viaggio
through
che
this
facciamo
journey
per
together. That is what
approfondire
we
quella che è
do
la
to better
conoscenza delle
understand the
determinanti
context of the
caratteristiche
origin of the source
dei
countries of
contesti
these
socioculturali dei
minors,
paesi di
of
origine
these young unaccompanied
dei
minors, and
minori,
she
dei
will do
giovani
this for what
migratori che arrivano in
concerns
Europa. Lo
Albania.
farà per quel che riguarda
Al-
l'Albania. Albania che
in Italy,
in
young
Italia
Albanians
i giovani albanesi che
today
arrivano in Italia
in
oggi
our in
nella
our
nostra
document that is
media, no?
called
Che è
the
il
statistical
report
report published
statistico
by the
di
Ministry
base del
of
Ministero del
Social
Lavoro e delle
Policies.
Politiche
It
Sociali, che
gives
ci
us
fornisce
a,
una
a, a,
fotografia
mm, a, f- a
periodica di
picture
quelle che
of the
sono le
presence of
presenze dei
unaccompanied
minori in
minors in
Italia.
Italy, and today Albania
Oggi
ranks
l'Albania occupa
fourth
il
in this
quarto posto
list with a
di
presence
questo
of
elenco, diciamo, con una presenza di
1,350 minors roughly.
1380
Up
minori
until a few
circa,
months
ma
ago,
fino a
before the
qualche mese
Ukrainian
fa,
emergency,
prima
for
di
sure, it was
questa
the first or
Ucraina
second.
sicuramente,
It would rank first
era
or
il primo
second.
o al
I don't
secondo
remember.
posto di questo
I'm pretty
elenco,
sure it
era
was
il
ranking
primo o il
either first or
secondo paese
second
per
if you
prevalenza dei
consider
minori in
the
Italia.
number of minors in Italy.
Capirete
You
bene che
can understand
chiaramente
that Albanian
i
minors
minori
bring with
albanesi
themselves a
portano con
background
sé un bagaglio, un'esperienza, è un
that
fenomeno
is
molto
completely
diverso rispetto a
different
quello dei
from
minori
minors
che
coming from
provengono
Africa, sub-Saharan Africa,
dall'Africa,
and so
dall'Africa
on.
subsahariana, a cui diciamo fino a qualche
Us
tempo fa
operators, we
eravamo
were
più abituati
more
come
used to this
operatori
kind
negli
of
addetti ai
people
lavori e
before.
all'accoglienza
This
dei
is a
minori in
phenomenon that
Italia.
is
È un
different
fenomeno
because
molto
of the
diverso
roots they
rispetto
follow,
al
for
nostro,
the
il
background,
background
because they know
migratorio, per
Italian, they speak
conoscenza della
Italian,
lingua
because
italiana,
of the
per
network of
rete
friends and
all'Italia
relatives that they have in
parentale
Italy as
che
well.
magari hanno, che spesso hanno nel paese
If, of course,
di
if
destinazione,
Italy is
quando
considered a
l'Italia è un paese
destination
di
country,
destinazione,
and
e
then
quindi di
also all the
conseguenza per
other related
l'indotto
aspects.
migratorio.
So I would like to welcome Mrs.
Quindi
Ermira
do
Kola, and
il
before giving her the
benvenuto
floor,
ad
let
Elmira
me
Cola.
give
Prima di
you
dargli la parola vi do qualche
some
comunicativo
advice.
di
The
servizio.
webinar is
Il
available in
webinar
different
è sempre
languages.
fruibile in
Italian,
diverse
that is the
lingue, ci
language
sono
in
l'italiano,
which
la lingua
Mrs.
in cui
Elmira will
parlerà
speak.
Elmira, e il
English,
greco,
Spanish,
l'inglese e lo
and Greek as
spagnolo,
well. You
confermato
can
appunto
actually
la
click
connessione
on the language in
facilitata
Zoom.
da Zoom.
For those
Chi
who
non vi
asked
è
us
chiesto di
the
ricevere
record
informazioni degli
of
incontri
the previous
precedenti, vi
meetings,
comunico che
at the end
tutti
of
gli
the
incontri
webinar,
verranno
all the
al
meetings will
termine del ciclo
be
di webinar
available on the platform of the project, fabtogether.net, on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter of Cidis. So you can go there, download them, and just follow the project. I would like to give the floor to Elmira. I would like to thank her for being with us today, and I wish you a very fruitful meeting. And I would like to thank Elmira first and our interpreters as well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me and for giving me the trust to be here as an Albanian citizen first. I do feel a great responsibility on myself because we're speaking about my fellow citizens moving to Italy, immigrating to Italy. So I will try to be as objective as possible and not to let emotions overwhelm me. I'm an intercultural mediator with the Albanian language for many years now. I've been doing this, and this made it possible for me to meet many migrants, including many minors as well. I will try to share the slides. I'm not really good. Some of the slides are too long, but I will probably skip them, but they are going to be available on online later on for you.
Datemi un feedback.
Okay, so it seems like it's working. Albanian minors, and not we have the male version here, minor, but not they don't speak about girls. Why? When we speak about migrations and we speak about minors in Albania, we have very, very high numbers of boys, but very small numbers when it comes to girls. So roughly 97.2% is male, is boys. They come to Italy. Actually, they migrate towards Europe, and only 2.8% of them is girls. So it is always wrong to speak in general, but in this case we can actually speak about minors in the masculine version. This is the unaccompanied minors applying for asylum in the country. It's never really related to Albanians because they don't really have access to asylum seeker group and to international protection. In Italy, the residence permit for minors is actually entails very high reserves and protection for minors. Albania was included in the list of safe countries in Italy, so they have no access to international protection. It is not as it used to be before. It is very, very difficult for Albanians to access to asylum seekers process, and it's something that it's very rarely applied to minors from Albania. You might have seen, or I'm sure we know, the reference law that is the one used for minors, and we will see how it's applied. Law number 47 on April the 7th, 2017 is aimed at strengthening the protections guaranteed to accompany foreign minors who are often the subject of trafficking by criminal organizations and ensure greater homogeneity in the application of the legislation. I would like you to keep in mind the part that says often the subject of trafficking by criminal organizations. The Zampa law defines unaccompanied foreign minors as the minor who doesn't have Italian or European Union citizenship, who is for any reason in the state territory, or who is otherwise subject to Italian jurisdiction, lacking the assistance and representation of their parents or other adults legally responsible for him or her under the laws in force in the Italian system. I'm moving on a little bit fast because I'm sure that many of you already know the part related to the legislation So what happens? The introduction of a single system of with the Law Decree 142 of 2015 led us to overcoming the inequalities between minors that were unaccompanied and the minors that were asking for international protection. Let's now speak about the Albanian citizens speaking Albanian. In this webinar, I have wanted to speak about minors coming from Kosovo as well. We will see together later on, because there's a whole part, cultural part, historical and geographical part as well, that somehow makes us feel part of the same people. We consider part of the same people, and this in the territories of the province of Bolzano we see it a lot, especially in the CPA. There are the centers for first reception, because minors coming from Kosovo and Albania are very similar. They speak the same language, they gather up together, they make a group, and also the reasons behind the migration are very similar. So we will speak about Albania, Kosovo, and then a few figures, and then history and culture. Who knows Albanian minors knows that these two colors are black and red are the colors of the Albanian flag. So I wanted to unify the territories. Here we have the map of Albania, just for you to understand who we border. So we have North Macedonia, Kosovo, Montenegro, and Greece. Greece is a very important country when it comes to migration flows from Albania. And then on the other side we have the Adriatic Sea, very close to Italy. We have the Ionian Sea, but the Ionian Sea is not really used for migration flows. On the left we have Kosovo, that borders with Serbia, and Albania at the bottom left. I put this slide here because Albania is a country that is developing. It's been developing for 30 years after the fall of communism. It's thriving, I would say. And I don't think the Albanian government likes to speak about how this country is a risk for minors and kids. The risks for kids and minors in Albania start from the moment they were born, because there is a very high mortality rate, and they continue throughout adolescence all the way to their adult life. There is a very severe lack of opportunities, and it becomes very hard for them to be autonomous and independent. There is roughly 857,000 children under the age of 18 in Albania, and there's still a lot to do for these people. They are at a very high risk of discrimination, abuse, and exploitation. A very big problem in Albania, a widespread issue, is of course unemployment. And the very high rate of unemployment leads directly to poverty, discomfort, poor access to health systems, and all a number of problems related. In Albania, there are some organizations taking care of minors. I would like to mention these SOS Children's Villages. It's an NGO founded in 1995, cooperating with a number of international organizations. There's a bunch, there's a wealth of organizations that cooperate with, and they are welcomed. Minors that live in discomfort in Albania, and also minors that are repatriated somehow, because they are forced to repatriation from different European countries, because these things do happen. So let's go back to Albanian minors. Often it is intended as Albanians and people from Kosovo So if even if they have similar background and they have similar language, so okay, we have similar language. We said similar geographic location. We have different levels of education and we have different economic conditions. Of course, we know the push factors. We have already seen everybody has already seen that these reasons and the economic conditions make a difference. The education makes a difference when it comes to getting to the destination country and where the person is somehow stopped, where the person decides to stay, compared to what we call the integration process. I would like to define it as the process of the acquisition of a personal independence and autonomy, but it's not this. What's the main prejudice when it comes to Albanian citizens? And here, I know it's a webinar, but I left it blank because I would like to give you a few seconds for you to fill in these white sheets, with these white spaces, with what you think is the general prejudice when it comes to Albanian citizens here. I carried out a small research on the territory among my colleagues when it comes to prejudice, and I would like to understand what the social services think when it comes to Albanian minors and what operators think of the same. Social services on the province of Bolzano, but also in other places, the very first thing is that they don't believe they're alone and that they have a family. So if they're not alone, they are cheating the system. What do we mean by they're not alone? We have seen, we have gone through this experience many times. A number of these Albanian minors, they do have a family behind them, so they're not orphans, but the law, no law decree speaks about the fact that minors have to be orphans in order to access support and aid and protection. They often have, as Alessandra was saying, they have a net of families and friends and relatives in the destination country. And this is definitely linked to the fact that Albanians migrate, both Albanians and Kosovo. After the 90s, there was a mass immigration. So actually, us as Albanians, we are pretty much everywhere. In every city, in every province, there must be somebody we know. So we know that when it comes for protection, and we shall keep this in mind, when it comes to protecting minors, the fact that on the territory there is a person, there is a family member, a relative, or a friend, it can be a positive aspect as a point of reference for the social operators. But we also know that the fact that knowing one person on the territory doesn't mean that this minor is not alone and it doesn't deserve to be accompanied and to be sheltered. So when they arrive on the territory, so that's the starting point. So people tend to start with a negative prejudice. What about their trip? Do they travel alone or accompanied? How do they travel? Plane. Most of the times they travel by plane. In Bolzano, we know they land in the airport of Verona, so they fly all the way from Tirana to Verona. So when it comes to Italy, France, and other European countries, they usually fly. Sometimes, especially the people from Kosovo, come with lorry or trucks or vans. Sometimes ferry as well, especially to the port of Bari. There's a number of studies carried out, and there have been a number of repatriation of minors also with ferries towards the city of Durazzo in Albania. Sometimes they're accompanied by people they know acquaintances, or sometimes they travel alone, or sometimes also with their father and mother. So what does it mean? It means that towards Italy, because in Italy we still don't have, especially in the airports, we don't really have great controls, and there's no much there is no many agreements between the two countries. So they travel with their father and mother, and when they get to Italy, they take the plane and they fly back to Albania. That's what has been what we have noticed. What we know is that this is difficult now, especially France. When France saw a mass immigration of Albanian minors, France is carrying out extensive controls that are also invasive. They ask questions in the airport, they start investigating, and they start interviewing people from the airport in Tirana. And this depends a lot on the kind of agreements that every single country has with Albania. Most of the people arriving, of course, as we said, they arrive from Albania directly. What's the consequences for the minors? Of course, the trauma. What I would like everybody to bear in mind is that we're speaking about minors. Minors that even if they're accompanied by their families, they are put somewhere and somebody else decides for them to leave. They are accompanied and then they are abandoned by their own family members on a territory they don't know. So how can these people leave this situation if they have the instruments to analyze this process? So us working, all of us working in the social aspect, we should better understand and focus on what does it mean to leave this journey, to make this leap all the way. And once arrived, probably where they didn't want to arrive, probably they stopped in Italy because they didn't have the documents, because there was no money to continue the trip, and then they need to face this prejudice that are related to, okay, they're cheating the system, and nobody wonders or worries about what actually happens to you before you decided to come here. So what happens when they arrive? They need a passport to convert the permit of residence, the permit of stay. But if you have a passport, there is also a very high risk of repatriation. So, and this is what happens most of the times, that despite the minors traveling with a passport, they throw the passport. They throw the passport away because if they show the passport, they run a very high risk to be repatriated without any possibility of support and agreement with the families or with the social services. On the territory of Bolzano, there is a high possibility of getting the permit to stay here. What about schools and education? Schools in our territory are still a problem because they do Italian courses, they organize them, but for foreign citizens, the access to school is granted only. Foreign minors have only access to high schools that are not, let's call them lyceum. They are more of technical studies, and this makes their background different from their peers. Then we have the disappears, and now we will see, and then we have the administrative procedure. Where do they come from? They may come from Berat. There is a beautiful city. Berat is not my city, but I know that it's beautiful. It's in the south of Albania. It's known as the city of 1,000 windows. But they can also come from Diber, as you can see. Of course, in Diber, not all the houses are like this. It's not slums, but Diber is an area of the north of Albania where unemployment is very high, and where there has always been a very high degree of poverty. You know, Albania is a wide territory, and who works with Albanian miners know, especially in Bolzano, most of the people come from Diber. Most of the miners come from this area. This is an abandoned little village in Kosovo. It's abandoned because Kosovo is suffering from a mass immigration of their people. Religion. Religion is always a very interesting aspect. Very few know, especially that in Albania, let's move on to the right, most of the citizens is Muslim. We have to remember that in 1967 we declared as the first secular state in the world, and this is written in our constitution. So it is difficult to speak about a big adherence with the religion of people, especially in Albania, because up until the 90s for us, the religion was tend to be hidden. In my family, for example, they never spoke about religion. It's something recent. And there is actually a sentence that Albanians say a lot, that the religion of Albanians is being Albanian. So we actually have a very particular approach to religion, but we still have the majority of Muslims. Then towards the border with Greece, we have a higher majority of Orthodox, and in the north of the country we have Catholics. So this is a little bit the division. Most of the miners arriving come from Muslim families, and often these people the miners, they don't go to the mosque or they don't pray. It's just a matter of family background and their last name. So the family is Muslim, so they were born Muslim, but they're not really active. There is still a number of secular people, as you can see. It's a country that has been lay for many years. I'm putting the Albanian flag because you notice that many boys, immigrant Albanian boys, they have a flag, a tattoo on their body, or they have a necklace. This is the flag of when the independence was declared in 1912. It's a very important date for Kosovo as well, because in 1912 Kosovo was added, was annexed to Serbia, and then all the problems and conflicts started back then between Kosovo and Serbia. The symbol is a double-headed eagle and one body. So even in a small country like Albania, there was the necessity, even in the flag, to repeat that North and South are somehow united under the same body. Because we do make a big difference between the North and the South in Albania as well. This is the flag that we had between 1934 to 1939. This symbol up here is linked to our national hero. There is Giorgio Castriota Skanderberg. Skanderberg fought against the Ottomans in the 1400, 1500. That's the period of the Ottoman occupation of Albania. And I believe it's quite interesting because Skanderberg is still a symbol, is still a national hero that everybody knows. It's like we never really had other national heroes afterwards for 500, 600 years. It is very difficult for Albanians to agree on a hero like Skanderberg. So during the social communist period, there was the famous 5-point star. That was the symbol of communists, and we took it out. We actually took it out right after. And this is the Kosovo with all the provinces. Kosovo was part of Serbia from 1913 to 1999, the year when the war started. The conflict, it was the result of great tensions between the countries. Despite independence, Kosovo is only recognized by 98 countries out of 193. Now there is the war of the plates, and these results to other problems both in Kosovo and in the north of Albania. During the war of Tito, the Albanians from Kosovo, they had certain rights that after were taken down during the regime of Milosevic. Minors who come were born in families that have always lived this fight and this war, and this we can actually see in the brains and in the brains and in the traumas of these young people such a trauma. People from Kosovo have always been emigrating, mass immigration of people, because if you consider that in 3 weeks over 500,000 people emigrated, over 860,000 were pushed away, were forced away. So over 80% of people from Kosovo were forced. Where did they move in those years? Many of them were IDPs, internally displaced people. Many others moved to Greece, Spain. Some came to Italy. Kosovo has always had very high migration rates towards Germany or Switzerland as well. That's where they want to go. That's where they usually want to go. That's their aim. Even in their case, male move and migrate much more than female. Greater Albania is a dream. Sometimes the miners you meet might talk about this myth that Kosovo will go back and make part of the Albanian territory. I believe this is not gonna happen, and it's impossible given the difference in the economic development of the two countries. Kosovo underwent a strong repression of Serbia and Yugoslavia back then. When it comes to independency, the use of language, and it has a much slower. It had a much slower growth, but I would say that Albania is much poorer than Kosovo, so that's why it's not going to happen. Sometimes people still speak about the myth of a greater Albania, though. The language. Albanians are very good at learning languages. They learn many languages from when they're young. I would like to repeat that we have a beautiful Indo-European language that has Illyric base with elements of Latin, Greek, Turk, and Balkans. It has a different structure. The Albanian alphabet is made up of 36 letters, 7 vowels, and the rest are consonants. And this is what you can see them here, and it's used both in Kosovo and Albania alike. Alessandra, please, if you want to collaborate, you let me know. As you wish. If you finish the first part, we can open a debate. I would like to invite everybody to write in the chat if you have a question, doubts, if you want to add something, if you want to share your own experience. Compared to the part that she left blank, so the white slide related to prejudice that you think are the most common, or even knowledge, cultural background, whatever you think is relevant and pertinent to today's webinar.
A
I
me
can only
viene in mente
think
appunto
about
interessantissimo
one
quello che
aspect,
hai detto
the condition of
rispetto
the minor,
alla
because that's
condizione del minore,
exactly,
perché
there is this
esiste assolutamente
prejudice towards the
questo
Albanian
pregiudizio
minor
del
that
minore albanese che non dobbiamo mai perdere di
we
vista.
always have to keep in
Appunto
mind the
il punto
central
centrale, che è quello che
point
comunque
that
subì
the
in
is a
quanto
minor.
minore,
So being a
subisce
minor
questo
is a victim
spostamento,
of the
no?
migration.
Quando viene portato
Is
e
taken
lasciato in
from adult and
Italia
is left in
dagli
Italy
adulti
by the
responsabili,
adults that are
per
responsible for him,
lui.
and this is also a
Quindi
trauma. When we need to
chiaramente
deal
anche
with
quello è
this
un
trauma,
trauma, anche quello è
we need to lead the
un
trauma,
elemento da
and it's
prendere
an
in
element that we always
considerazione.
have to consider so
Tant'è
much
che
that an association that is partner of our
un'associazione
project
parte
working
del
in
nostro
Emilia
progetto che
Romagna
lavora
was
in
telling
Emilia
us that
Romagna ci raccontava
the
qualche
prosecutor's
tempo fa che
office of
addirittura la
Bologna
procura
opened
di
a
Bologna, se non mi
folder
sbaglio, aveva aperto un fascicolo
against
contro
minors
i minori
arriving.
che
So first of
arrivavano,
all, trying
tanto
to
era,
create a
diciamo, provare a
deterrent,
disincentivare questo
they
fenomeno, lì
would
arrivavano proprio in aeroporto, venivano
they opened up
lasciati.
a folder
Avevano
against the
un
minors left
fascicolo contro
in the
i
airport
minori,
and not
o
against
comunque contro
unknown
appunto
people
gli
as it used to be
ignoti,
before,
come
related
poteva,
to the
credo,
for the
potesse
abandonment of the
fare in
minor
quel
on behalf
caso
of their
anche
parents.
l'abbandono di minori
So
o qualcosa del
I remember
genere.
this, and it was a shock.
Lo ricordo, cioè mi rimase molto
I
molto
was speechless when I
impresso.
read this first. Even
Anche
us
noi
in
nell'ospedale di
Caserta,
Caserta
we have a
abbiamo
number of minors coming
diversi
from
minori
Albania,
che arrivano
and
dall'Albania, e ci
we do
rendiamo
realize
assolutamente conto di
what it
quello che è
is, even when
anche
it comes to
rispetto
relation with their
alla
family.
famiglia e al rapporto con la famiglia, che
As you
dicevi
said,
appunto,
number
a
one, it
parte
doesn't
che
only happen to
non succede
Albanian
solo ai
minors
minori
who have
albanesi,
a
ovviamente,
relative or a family
famiglie
behind,
che
family member behind
partecipe
that
del
take
loro
care of their
processo migratorio,
migration
perché
process and
succede
flows
con
and
tanti altri ragazzi delle più
procedure.
diverse
It happens with other nationalities
nazionalità,
as well.
di
There's
accoglierli,
family members or
di
relatives
partecipare
welcoming these
con,
people,
di
or they tend
coinvolgere
to
una
they
loro
tend to
famiglia che non è
involve
in Italia ma c'è
families that are not in
presente,
Italy but probably in other countries, and
e
that
quindi
participates
partecipa
to
al loro
their
processo
migration. Even
migratorio.
even the issue of
Anche la
language, since
questione
it's a
della
language with
lingua,
so
avere una
much
lingua con
influence,
influenze così vaste,
many of these
sono
people
ragazzi che
already
tante
speak
volte
very
parlano
good
anche
Italian,
bene
unlike
l'italiano,
other people, other
rispetto ai
young and
stranieri
minors
che
migrating to Italy.
arrivano. E quindi sì, tutto questo rende particolarmente
And this makes the
specifica
welcoming and
l'accoglienza
the reception
dei
of Albanian
ragazzi
minors
albanesi.
somehow easier. There is a
C'è
question.
una
They're
domanda,
asking, what are
chiedono
today the
quali sono
obstacles
oggi gli
to
ostacoli allo
tourist
sviluppo
development of
turistico
Albania?
in Albania.
Sicuramente
Well, the answers, well, the answers sometimes may be my personal opinions. There is a very deep tourist development in Albania, especially in the south of Albania.
soprattutto la zona del sud Albania.
Looking at the map from Valona south, I would say, let's say that Valona is the point where the Adriatic and the Ionian Sea meet. The beaches are beautiful and the sea is beautiful, so I don't think I need to advertise it, but here there's no obstacles. The problem is that Albania is very small, and during the summer Albania is invaded by tourists, by us Albanians, because in the summer we all go back there. I've been living in Italy for 27 years now, and every single August I fly back to my hometown, to my country. So it's a kind of development that somehow it's not sustainable long term, because it exploits a territory that is very, very slow, very small, and the beach is not enough for everybody. This kind of tourism created a great economic disparity, because the very few working for tourism, they become wealthier and richer, but in reality tourism for a very poor country is also a danger. Because why? Because they raise the price. With Italian salaries in Albania, we are rich. So the problem with the developing countries is always the same. When we have the possibility, when we are richer and we have more possibility to pay, we should always think about the condition of people living in the same country and making money in that currency, or making money according to the salary. For we have to consider about the same situation of the people. So if I travel and I pay 15-20 euros to eat fish at dinner,
In Albania io conosco minori,
for me it's nothing, but I know minors working in Albania for a whole month for 100 euros
quindi
per month.
c'è un turismo.
So, you know, the situation is completely different.
Che non
There
che
is
non sta guardando assolutamente
there is a kind of tourism that doesn't care about the environmental aspect, because in the north of Albania they build huge resorts on the sand, and this is a problem for the environment, for the economy of such a small country, because most of the people I know would never go to such resorts. So the people from the north of Albania,
migrano, vengono in vacanza.
in the north of Albania, we see a lot of people from Kosovo, because, as I said, there's a strong connection between the two countries.
Due paesi, ed è per quello
And I like to stress it, because people from Kosovo, they say it's a choice for them to bring their money and spend it in Albania.
che però
I don't want to destroy the tourism in Albania. There is the development of a sustainable tourism.
sostenibile che
There's a more, trekking path in the center of the country. But yeah, Albania, we have to consider, is also a very corrupted country. There's a very high level rate of corruption. There's a very big political instability. There has never, after the end of the communism, there has never been a political stability. So even if tourism has been developing in the last few years, this has not led to any improvement of the conditions in the country, but it only made a very few people richer.
Grazie Elmira.
Thank you, Elmira. This is what happens in other countries, in Italy as well. In a kind of tourism that don't look at sustainability, or they look at the future, they only want to make money. They're not investing in a virtuous way on the territory, so they become richer and richer in a very short period of time, but then they are destroying the territory. This doesn't happen only in Albania. In Naples, it's the same, and it's been happening ever since flocks of tourists have been invading the city. So here as well you can see that tourism can have a negative impact as well, and it's not just all glitter, all gold what glitters. If there's no other interventions, we can have a break. It's 11:22. See you at 11:35 if for everybody is fine, for Elmira is fine. We're gonna have time to have a coffee, and then we will start talking about our approach to minors unaccompanied in Italy and in Europe. Thank you.
Rieccoci, allora se Elmira è pronta diamo subito.
So here we are back. So if Elmira is ready, we can start with the second part of our meeting.
volevo fare due
I wanted to tell you something about the prosecutors of Bologna. It's the same happens in Bolzano. It happened in the last 3 years. It happened at least twice, so that I know, so probably more, where minors were directly reported by the police rather than the family behind them, because as we said before, we have a report of the prosecutor's office of Bolzano and Bologna alike for cheating the system, trying to a fraud against the government. This actually gives these miners one more responsibility which is heavy, and this should also make us think about the link with the territory. So there is if you go to a territory that is biased and there's so much prejudice about you, so you can understand how difficult it can be.
E quanto questo poi
And
impatta su tutte
this
le
actually
di Albania, sì, di parte
affects
marittime
all the
completamente.
process of their sort of blending in the new country. Another slide that I think is important, the dialect. It seems like it's difficult to learn the Albanian language, but we also have two main dialects. One is Geg, spoken in the north, and the Tosk. Tosk is harder. Geg, the one in the north, is more. It's a little harder. Even within Albania itself, they say that we are the like we speak a harder language, and it's very similar to the Albanian they speak in Kosovo. We do understand each other perfectly when we switch in between the two dialects. It's just two different dialects that the moment you hear them, you understand where they're coming from directly. The strong connection with Italy. Fortunately, in Italy, they have been thinking about Italian colonialism, and they never mentioned the fact that Albania was part of it. Here we found this newspaper. We had a monarchy as well. So Albania has always had a very strong link with Italy. They forgot about the period when Italy was trying to conquer Albania, and Albanians somehow welcome very well Italians here and anything that comes from Italy whenever it arrives to Albania. We have a strong and profound link with Greece as well. Sometimes it's a good one, sometimes it can take a bad connotation, like it happens with countries that are bordering. There is always some issues with territories when it comes to migration flows and the movements of people. Undoubtedly, Greece is even easier than Italy to reach, because you can actually walk the border with Greece, illegally of course, but you can do that just walking, crossing the border. So the movement at the end of the communism, the migration flows were mainly towards Greece and Italy alike. As you know, in Italy it happened most of the times with dinghies, and now since it's easier to move without visa in the Schengen area, as we said, people fly as well. Why do they migrate? Why are these miners coming all the way here? Well, 83.7%, which is the vast majority, look for better life conditions. Everything is connected. The conditions of a country that is far from obtaining and attaining economic stability. There's very, very high levels of unemployment, and of course, all of this is linked to the narrative of us, people emigrated during the years, what we speak afterwards. So our narrative of the migration, it is always the same, but we shall speak about how the failure of the migration might affect him, the person, his psychological balance, and the family he has behind. So even there, where people struggle in the destination country, very rarely the narrative will be real. Most of the times the narrative will be everything is fine, everything works. There will be these phone calls where you tell your family that everything is alright. Many times people save up throughout the year so that they can go back with a big amount of money to Albania, to their families. And this feeds the fake belief that in Italy everything works and everything is fun and everything is happy. everyone is happy. So these people have scarce economic conditions and purchasing power. They come, some of the minors come for study reasons, some others come from family reunifications. We have seen in Bolzano sometimes even some girls, given the socio-economic instability of the country, they prefer to come here to Italy in high school so that they can access the Italian university afterwards. They migrate for a lack of trust in the Albanian state. I would like to reiterate this because in reality we will see in the slides, it is very important for us to remember that these people do not believe in the state, Albanian state. They don't trust Albania. And even if we wanted to build a trust in the system of the government here in Italy, it's all connected because we need to start from scratch with them. They never trusted the government, so they didn't trust Albania, so they will not trust Italy. Their parents don't have it, their grandparents don't have it, their families don't have it, so they don't have this feeling of belonging anywhere. Some of them migrate because of the Kanun. I'm sure you've heard about it, and we will see together what it is. Others say that, some say that they're emigrating because of Kanun. So most of the times, though, it's because they're searching for a better living conditions. Sometimes they do migrate for family violence related reasons. The international report of UNICEF say that children in Italy tend to have made the decision to migrate individually, as well as was the case of 75% of children interviewed as part of this study, and a third of the cases, it says here in the report. Instead, many cases I met myself have had problems with family violence. In Albania, there's a very strong domestic violence against women, but also against minors. So do not underestimate this aspect that is becoming more and more important. We shall always bear this in mind when we think about the education and training path of these minors. I have seen very few access to psychological support and aid for minors to work and process such pain, sorrow, and trauma. These people have undergone violence for years. They have been witness of violence for years. And then they also undergone the trauma of leaving the country. So it's one on top of the other. What is the Kanun? Let's now see. Lek Dugagini was the first of writing it. It's a code. Kanun is a code that scanned all the aspects of life in a mountainous region in northern Albania. We're speaking about the 1400, the occupation of the Ottomans. They were not able to move further the north of Albania. And so people somehow started using this Kanun. It was a code for people to, it contains a set of rules of behaviors for life and society, not just certain aspects, but it's all about vengeance, because the Kanun, especially in Italy, Kanun in Italy is known as the Code of Vengeance. What is Kanun? I will make it short. Since there is no government, there's no jail, if you kill a person, according to Kanun, the closest relative of the victim had to kill you. So like this, and that's how they say, you wash blood with blood. So the blood that has been shed, you wash it off with more blood. Kanun during communism wasn't used any longer, wasn't implemented, very rarely, especially in the north mountainous regions. with the fall of communism and with the greater stability, with the greater instability, they somehow brought it back, especially for the vengeance. It's true for a very, very limited number of cases. For the part related to the vengeance, in Kosovo, Ibrahim Rubova, the president, made a lot of changes. There's Operation Colombo working in Albania, in the north of Albania, to try and stop this bloodshed all the time. Not all the miners saying that they're fleeing violence or threats of Qanun is true, but saying that all the miners are fleeing Qanun, it's a dangerous generalization, because we always need to consider every single case by itself. But it is something true, like it's becoming more and more common, and it's coming back into fashion, unfortunately. Albanian culture funds part of its identity on its diversity facing Balkan cultures, while sharing many of its historical traits and processes. We are proud of being Albanians ourselves. I think you have noticed it if you have known or worked with Albanians. In its historical development, the so-called Albanian identity has been constructed as the primacy of ethnic belonging. So before being Catholics, Orthodox, Muslims, or whatever, we are Albanians. We can define ourselves as Albanians. We grow with this narrative. Even if this narrative doesn't take place in the family, because in my case, for example, the family has never really considered the Albanian identity, but I hear it in school, in the street, when I gather with people, and so on. So this part is clear. The Albanian identity is not the country of Albania or the state or nothing. There is actually a very big lack of confidence and trust against the state. So we have this, though. Our culture is based on the fact that we are different. Most of the times we say that we are better. Many people, they think they're better just because they're Albanians. So we can actually think of a way of self-representation of the peoples that, who identify with and recognize the primacy of the values of ethnicity as opposed to the concept of statehood. This belief has ingrained in the Albanian people a kind of egocentrism whereby at all levels and in all aspects, Albanians have always been the reference point for all the peoples of the world. You know, this is true now. I laugh about it, but you know, anthropology teaches us that small countries, those peoples that have undergone a lot of discrimination, minorities, tend somehow to close up, and it's a sort of defense, it's a self-protection. They want to convince themselves that they're better and stronger than others. And what does it bring? This entails something. When we speak about adolescents and migrations, because most of the migration in Albania is adolescents, they're not kids, they're adolescents, it produces a distance, a gap with the society of the destination country. What do? They blend in, but they just gather up with other peers from Albania, and they start from this egocentrism. I'm not proud of it, but I believe it's something very important that we should know and that we should deal with, for them to blend in with the Italians as well. With the fall of communism in 1991, the country found itself in coming to terms with unrestrained liberalism, but we didn't have the tools to face it. The transition from the social communist collectivity, everything was collective, there was no private property. The transition to individualism, in Albania we have a reckless individualism, and this has left deep marks on the society. The miners we see today were born and raised in a society that bears the marks and bears the wounds of this reckless individualism, even after believing or growing in a situation of social communism where everything was related to the collectivity, and then you become individualist. In 1997, there was a severe economic crisis, financial collapse due to the pyramid system led to the ultimate collapse of trust in the state, unable to protect its own citizens. There's these 5 or 6 years where we believe that we are free, we believe we are in Europe, we look with optimism and positivity, and in 1997 this strong economic crisis affects us. So total lack of trust against the government, and this is definitely a burden for those families who had participated to this pyramid system. It happens that people open the jail and they armed everybody. Disarming Albanians took a long time and with partial results. More than 3 million rifles. We're talking about 2.8 million people registered and 3 million rifles. And these weapons were never delivered, or they were sold to European countries or sent to Kosovo. So we were saying end of the 90s, the fall of communism, and in March 1997 a great financial crisis. Strong corruption came afterwards. In this landscape of enormous and profound structural changes, Albanian miners faced 3 crises. The one of the Albanian state, the one of the cultural and educational model, and the one of adolescence at the same time. So the first 2 may look new, but we need to consider the third as well. We are talking and dealing with adolescents. They were born and they were raised in chaos. They need to find a place in a world as adolescents. They need to find a place in a world that is chaotic as Albanians. In this context, then, Albanian youth are from one side fascinated and impressed by the Western world, but at the same time they bear the most typical Albanian cultural traditions, of which they are strong assertors and victims together. I don't know if any of you is willing to do that. This is a documentary recorded by a young Albanian. It's called Neverland by Erald Dika. Neverland speaks about the crisis of the 1997 from the point of view of adolescence. This was recorded in my city, even if the movie director is not from my city, actually. Neverland. Take a look at it. It's a very interesting documentary for those of you who want to see what young people have gone through in the very delicate problem of the crisis in 1997. And that moment changed radically the Albanian society, and it changed it because many weapons started to become accessible. There was a peak of violence, and what we have seen so far, and what can be seen also in the documentary Neverland. Then we have the progressive phenomenon of urbanization and the consequent depopulation of the countryside that has occurred since 1991 has created situations of great hardship, such that it leads to congestion of space. Most of miners have economic problems. The countryside is extremely poor because most of the people moved to the cities. And this has changed completely the geography of the country. It has changed the geography of the capital, Tirana, that became bigger and bigger with this difficult suburbs. So the young people, they will tell you I was born and raised in Tirana, but probably they mean the suburbs and the outskirts that were very poor. The entrance into the world of adults is at the end of the compulsory schooling, so 18 years old, but at 14 years old, one is considered an adult capable of taking a job and work and responsible for the family. So finding a balance for us, us as operators, to find a balance between the fact that they are minors, but somehow and in their family and in their society, they have always been considered adults for years now, even if even if they are 16. Then we always need to keep this in mind. Girls, we never really see girls, at least not in Bolzano. The girls, on the other hand, often experience a situation of strong subordination to the male of the family. In recent years in Albania, I have seen an upsurge in domestic violence in the country. Decisions are almost never the product of a single individual. Patriarchal families have inseparable moral bonds, and in this fabric, it is almost impossible to disregard the cruel reality of family rules. Where do they migrate? It has always been towards Greece and Italy, but also towards the US, United Kingdom, Germany, Turkey, Switzerland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, France, Canada, and Australia. So pretty much everywhere. People from Kosovo have definitely preferred the United Kingdom after the War of Kosovo at the end of the 90s. Many Albanians have presented have been asylum seekers and seeking for international protection in the United Kingdom, pretending they were from Kosovo. And given their social support, the United Kingdom has become the number one, the top destination country, because the conditions, the welcoming and reception conditions in Italy and Greece are not the same as the one in the United Kingdom. Everybody knows, and it is definitely more difficult to go illegally to the United Kingdom, but still everybody tries. Germany and Switzerland, as we have seen, they always see the presence of people from Kosovo, but now also from Albania. They travel in Europe, they migrate to Europe, and in the United States they do rely to the lottery of green cards and visas. Some figures in Italy we have seen, so this data, 15,595 the minors that were unaccompanied in June 2022 in Italy, as Alessandra was saying. With the war in Ukraine, many minors, a wealth of minors have arrived to Italy. There's this narrative in the province of Bolzano where they say the 25% of these young are in Emilia-Romagna, 20% in Tuscany. In Bolzano, if we look at the arrivals of minors, we have 44.7% of Albanians. They come to Bolzano, they come to Italy when they're roughly almost 18 years old. Most of them arrive and they are 16, 17 years old. And often when they turn 18, it seems like they move away. In the province, they struggle to respect the rules. They struggle with a system that sees them as cheaters and fraudulent people. So they tend to escape the system and to disappear. They become unreachable. What does it mean for them, and what does it mean for us as well? It means that we have a lot of people, very young, that are in this country because they don't really go away from the country. They just go away from the reception center, and they have no protection. They have no support from the state, no protection whatsoever. They don't want to integrate. That's what people think about the Albanians. But considering all we have seen so far, what can be the adherence to an educational and training project of these people, of course? And what could be the educational path? What's the greatest challenge? They make a group, and they're always between themselves, so with other people from Albania. They come, they're already grown up, 16, 17 years old, so they don't really have much time to live here before they become 18. We need to consider them all the same, but that's a risk. That's a risk because simplifying will lead us to victimize them, and we will probably overlook the capacity they have to self-define themselves. We need to consider the perception of themselves that they have as well. So it becomes extremely difficult not to consider the passage to the new life, so when they become adults. Psychosocial distress. So all the things that we have seen now, all these things lead to a psychosocial distress of these adolescents that is not recognized because they're not seen. It's not seen and is not recognized properly. The reception of unaccompanied minors after the age of 18. Let me say this, even if I'm sure you know this. You know the legal protections they have in Italy, and what's the administrative continuation. I would like to see together why very often this doesn't happen in the case of minors, Albanian minors. The administrative continuation may be ordered in all cases in which an accompanied minor, upon reaching the age of majority, although having embarked on a path of social insertion, requires prolonged support aimed at the successful completion of this path aimed at autonomy. The request for administrative continuation should be submitted to the prosecutor's office at the juvenile court before the age of 18. Such requests may be made by social services or the person in charge of the minor. If these individuals do not apply for administrative continuation, then it can last and it can be requested very often, but most of the times it is overlooked, which means they don't take this instrument into consideration. It means that in Italy we have adolescents that are 18 years old and one day, after they turn 18, they are abandoned, because if they arrived 6 months before turning 18, there was no possibility to use such an instrument, and we couldn't do anything with them. We couldn't support them, we couldn't protect them. So what's the result? What do you think we could do to these people in only 6 months? And not requesting the administrative continuation, this instrument is a big damage against them first and the whole society afterwards, because we all lose here. It's a lose-lose game. The risks are that these people may be victims of trafficking, they may be exploited, they are not protected, they were given very few instruments. So I'm not saying that I don't want to blame people working in the reception centers, but this is something that happens. There's not enough time, they work in emergency, they need to respond promptly, and they don't have the instruments, they're not able to build trust. So if these people fall victim of exploitation, that they don't feel comfortable to share with the operators. The percentage of minors victims of exploitation is very high. For sure, it's very high in the cases of Roms and Gypsies, and we have seen a great increase in the number of minors exploited for work in the United Kingdom as well. What's the rules for repatriation of minors? I mentioned already that with the port through the port of Bari, they're often repatriated. Repatriation and minors. I wanted to stop here because it's unless there are agreements with countries and there have been investigations and they have already spoken to the social services of the country and the families, a repatriation and minors shouldn't exist. It's illegal. But this doesn't happen. And what happens? It happens that Albanians and people from Kosovo throw the passports or hide the passport when they arrive because they are afraid of being repatriated. And this happens all the time because in the SOS villages before, the NGO, they welcome a lot of young people that have been repatriated with coercion. So it would be better to conduct family investigations and interviews since we have this prejudice. Some of them do it. In 2021 there were 105 investigations and surveys, mainly with minors from Tunisia, Bangladesh, Albania, Kosovo and Pakistan. 21 and 14 in Albania and Kosovo. It's a very detailed survey. And there was an interview from a little girl from Diber speaking in excruciating detail about the violence that she had undergone at the hand of the father during within the family. I'm trying to be quick because I would like to give some space to the Q&A as well. For me, it is extremely important to speak about the risk of these minors that haven't been accompanied for lack of time, lack of instruments, that these minors remain on the territory and they remain at a very high risk of exploitation, work exploitation, or other kind of exploitation. So let's consider this when we are talking about, when we're talking with these 16, 17-year-old people that may look reluctant to talk. I would like to stop and see if there's any question. Thank you so much, Emira.
Grazie a te, Emira, grazie mille.
We do have questions. Let's see. Compared to what you said about the risk of the generalization, I would like to specify what's the common thread of all these webinars, of the cycle, and that comes out in every single meeting. The approach of this topic, of this cycle, is knowing the context, the socio-cultural context, trying to use the knowledge of the operators coming from a certain country, and knowing also the socio-economic situation of these countries, to better understand where the people we work with are coming from.
Non prescinde una enorme attenzione all'ascolto e
and this comes with individual approaches. Operators shall always have an individual approach, but knowing the background does help when it comes to the politics, culture, the ways in which these people come and go, repatriation, education details, and so on. So the more we know, the better. And then we have to listen and understand the details and the elements that the person gives us. And we need to build together a path that will lead these people to independence and autonomy. I would like to thank for the contribution given. I also have another idea. There's a new podcast, Blora. I don't know if you have heard talking about it. It's a podcast that talks about. Vlora is the name of the sheep that 8 August 1991 landed to Bari with roughly 20,000 Albanians in 1991, as I said, and it speaks about the situation of the city of Bari that saw itself involved in the major mass migration phenomenon that has seen that has arrived to Europe, and it speaks about the conditions of Albania back then, and also the conditions, the situation of Albania that led these people to leave. There was this ship that was leaving, and the people decided to leave everything as it was to just jump on the ship and arrive here. I'm at the second episode myself, but I do advise you to listen to it. It's a beautiful podcast, and for you to understand such an important migration flow, it anticipated by 15 years what happened afterwards. Let's see the questions. I think many entrepreneurs are interested in moving and relocating their activities in Albania. Is it true? Yes, it's always been like this ever since the fall of communism. The first company entering was Coca-Cola. It's weird and strange enough. Many of us have noticed, especially from the call centers, most of the call centers have been moved to Albania. Workforce is very cheap there, so entrepreneurs may arrive. Of course, it's better for them. It's convenient. They go there and they relocate their activity. They pay more than people make in Albania, but it's still much less than what they're paying in Italy. There's a lot of shoe producing company and clothes, and also the fish market. My city is close to the sea, and there's a lot of big multinational companies relocated there. They are always paid 100 euros per month, but 100 euros per month, we're talking about poverty. 100 euros there is not 1,000 euros here. 100 euros means you're poor. But yes, it's true, there's a lot of Italian entrepreneurs relocating their activities there. Good morning, and thank you for all this precious information. What narrative do you give to these adolescents on the expectations to improve their life in Italy, or like it happens with other nationalities, they think they're coming to Italy, but then they want to go to Europe? According to the statistics, in which occupations do they do better? Expectations. Expectations are high, but we need to consider as well even the simple one, the trivial one, that is surviving. It's true that some of the miners come here accompanied to the airport. They're sent to Italy, they're sent to Greece or France because they're one person less to feed at the end of the month. In many cases, I know that this is the situation. So survival. In Italy, somebody will take care of you. The state in Italy will take care of you. They're not going to leave you on the street. They will feed you. So this is one of the main reasons. It's not always. But the narrative that we give is that in Italy everything is fine. People work. They have a house. And it's not that we're going to have a future ourselves, but we will be able to help our families. Albania is a country that lives on economic remittances of people that have immigrated. We do talk in the narrative of Italy and Europe as it used to be before. We still lie about it. It's not the truth. We don't say the truth. Adolescents do not share with their families or friends the great discrimination that they live just because they are Albanian minors that are unaccompanied. This is not told. This is not the narrative that is told. Migration flows are always related to the territory where you have somebody you know, and where you have somebody who made it. So the province of Bolzano have always had social services that have worked well. We can see that the biggest figures are in Emilia-Romagna and Tuscany, not in Bolzano. It's because these young people know by other people that minors are welcomed in the reception center. So if you are younger than 18 and you arrive in Italy, then you are ensured a shelter, a bed. What happens after you turn 18? We don't know, but that's the biggest problem we have to face. There was also a third question. I think I missed it. If there's statistics and in which employment, which occupation, what kind of jobs do they do best? Italy and Greece in buildings, but I would say that in Europe, the world of buildings is becoming more and more Albanian. You know, if I miss speaking Albanian, it's enough for me to go to a building site and talk to somebody. They're all Albanians. Definitely the vast majority there, especially in the first few years. In Italy, there's a bunch of entrepreneurs from Kosovo and Albania. They have their own building companies, and most of the time, these people hire Albanians as well. Even there, they run investigations on the working conditions of these people. All these people were still minors when they're still 18 or roughly 18. We have the case of an entrepreneur hiring 5 to 10 Albanians per year. But this is the problem of having protection for these people, because after they turn 18 we don't know the conditions that they will live in, but these are the first jobs they approach. There's another intervention on behalf of my colleague, who she's responsible of one of the communities we have in Caserta for the minors. Irma Lili, thank you so much. It's been very interesting. At the site of Caserta, we have welcomed 6 minors in the last year. They study at high school, 1 mechanics, informatics, 1 hotel studies, and 1 of them turned 18. And with the cooperation of the family, we obtained school documents. But they are work oriented and they want to help their family, so they want to stop studying and start working. I have nothing to add to the precious testimony. That's what I would add. They work. Irma confirms what I said, that they want to help their family of origin, they want to start working right away, and this is, just a personal opinion. It's saddening to see very smart boys and girls who don't want to keep studying or who don't want to go to university because they are rushing to work and send money to their families. This is something we see not only with Albanians but everybody. In the province of Bolzano, the province of Bolzano sent unaccompanied minors to the south, paying the maintenance. These are political choices. They don't want the minors to remain on the territory. They want the minors to be moved somewhere else. We care for the protection of the minors. We want the minors to be taken care of. So we have nothing to say about the centers where they go. We should stop and think about the minors being treated as a parcel. These minors think they are unwanted, they are undesired and treated as a burden. They feel bad about it. They feel like unwanted, as I said. So that's what I meant. This is one of the reasons for which they don't ask for the administrative continuous for Albanians. I mean, for other minors, they use this instrument, but never until 21 years old. This is what I've seen, at least in the last, in all the years I've worked. For some people it is used more, but not for Albanians for some reason. People believe they don't need this instrument because they have somebody, and this has been the procedure on the territory. I would like to know if there's data on the adoptions of minors in the Italian families. I don't know if the person speaks about Albanians or in general minors of any nationality. There's data that I don't have.
Sicuramente ci sono dei dati che io non ho, quindi
No.
su questo non ce li ho. Rispetto ai minori
Mm.
stranieri,
The
il boliviano viene usato molto molto poco.
the adoption
Proprio perché nel senso
the adoption is not a solution that is really resorted to
molto nel sistema sociale.
that often, especially not in Bolzano. There is data, there's statistics, but I don't have them.
Ci sono, non nel caso, molto raramente nel caso dei
Since there's this strong prejudice,
se non tenendo presente
as I said, that they have somebody behind, then they don't do it. Unfortunately, numbers are very low on a national level, and with reference to all nationalities of the foreign minors, I think if we get to 3%, 4% maximum of minors that have been adopted by families is even too much. And FA.B works in this direction, and that's why I think that I have to intervene. We have worked a lot to promote the culture of adoption, because we do understand that for the first difficulty is the cultural resistance. So adopting an adolescent or a minor is something that is definitely not common in Italy. It's extremely rare. We think of problems linked to institutions. Of course, adopting means that you need to have social assistance of the municipality and office. It's a totally different procedure. There is not just the municipality paying a certain amount of money to a reception center. Adoption means a follow-up. You need to choose a family. You need to see if the family is suitable. There must be a list of families, and you need to profile the family. There must be a work carried out not just on the family but also on the minor. There is a sensitization. They need to raise the awareness of the community, and it's extremely difficult. These people who arrive and they're almost 18, as the numbers show us. It's difficult to adopt somebody that is so, let's say, old, but most of the
maggioranza dei minori che arriva
Most of the minors coming to Europe and Italy alike are almost 18, so the time to build together
costruire con loro
a process for them to become autonomous is extremely short, and that's why the instrument, the administrative instrument, is extremely important and extremely good. It's the only, I think Italy is the only country that foresees a protection such as this one and thought out for such situations. So figures are still very low, and we do work to the family assistance and the family welcoming. Those young people that turn 18 maximum after 6 months, they're out of the institutions that take care of them. So what we do is we try to put these young people, 18 years old, in families that are selected. So it's adults, so we don't need the court and all the social workers taking, analyzing the families and assessing if the family is suitable or not. So, but this is something that is secondary, is ancillary. We know that the love that a family can give is definitely better than any other institution taking care of these young people, but for these people to being able to have an effective inclusion, we need more than only this. Last question. In Bolzano, have you ever had a negative response for these young people to remain even after they turn 18? Actually, yes, last week, because it was due to lack of time. That's what they told us. So since the person was in the CPA only for 2 months, they believed that they couldn't assess the situation properly. It was only 2 months, and that was the very first negative feedback we had. In Bolzano, we have a strong problem. We have big problems with the police office. There's a problem with the conversion procedure. Even if these people are enlisted in a training course, they don't give us the documents for them look for a job after they turn 18. In Bolzano, we do have this kind of problem, unfortunately. The lack of a migration project, but from your side, but it's something chosen by others, gives you even more of a trauma. How do you see these affecting their future? Well, this is a $1 million question. None of the persons migrating chose to migrate. I came here to study, but I had to leave my house when I was 16 because the education system wasn't working and my family thought I had to. So I think I didn't really choose. I had to. But the worst part is feeling abandoned. So that's the kind of trauma we should focus on the most. These are people that have felt abandoned and not the possibility to choose, because some people choose, some others don't, or some others are forced to leave. But the worst is the feeling of abandoning after so many years. I still feel it. I was lucky myself. I had access to a number of instruments. I was welcomed by the society when I arrived. and I was able to cope with the discomfort and with the trauma of feeling abandoned and not living in my country. Mm,
Questa, la doppia assenza, come la chiama Sayad,
we are not
non
present.
siamo presenti nel paese di partenza, ma
We don't exist in the source country, and we don't fully exist in the destination country either when we arrive. So we need to deal with the prejudice that the system has against these young people, because all the migrants are somehow forced to do that, either for poverty, for wars, for conflicts, because education is not good, or because the healthcare system is not good enough or is poor.
certo.
So I think
Io direi che
that this was the last question. I would like to thank Elmira Kola for this contribution. Thank you so much for
ringrazio voi
participating to this meeting and webinar and the previous ones as well.
ai
I
incontri.
do wish you a Merry Christmas
Auguro buonissime feste natalizie
and a very Happy New Year.
di anno 2023.
See you on January the 10th for the next meeting. That
Incontro che sarà
we will be Jose Carlos Cadrera Medina, an expert and cultural mediator and expert for migration in Spain.
la Spagna.
And after speaking about the miners from Morocco and Algeria in Spain, he will give us a contribution also in two meetings, 10th and 17th of January, on communication. He's an expert of communication. He also runs Ruta Mediterranea, a radio program, and he will share contributions as well as instruments and strategies of verbal and non-verbal communication. 10th and 17th of January. The 12th instead, we will have Antonella Inverno from Save the Children, and she will give us a comparative analysis of the welcoming systems involved in the FA.B project, and they work in the Mediterranean, and that they all cope with immigration of minors. So we will try to explore with her the common points and the differences of welcoming and receptions systems and centers of the legal framework in Italy and other countries, and that sees the presence of unaccompanied young people, with a specific reference to Italy, France, Spain, Cyprus and Malta. So once again, thank you so much. I wish you happy holidays, and thank you to everybody and the interpreters too. Thank you so much.